Glad to see you all here this evening. This is the meeting of the Till the Well Runs Dry, the Arroyo Seco, Arroyo Currents meeting, and we're glad that you're here. Thank you very much. You know, we're going to do a couple of things here this evening that are very important. The first is we're going to talk about the Pasadena's water plant, but the first part of it we're going to do is a report on the Arroyo Seco Canyon project, which many of us have been involved in, and we wanted to give you the latest information with regard to the Arroyo Seco plan. And it's and then after we finish that, we're going to move to a discussion of Pasadena's water plan for the next 25 years. And there's going to be some very interesting discussion about how they put their plan together and what some of the problems with their plan are and what you can do about it as well. We think it is not a well-crafted plan. So, and then following that, we're going to have some information about the nursery and also some announcements of a very interesting event that's going to occur next Friday of next week, that is, which is going to be a look at a very interesting project that the Arroyo Seco Foundation is involved in called the LA River Fish Passage Program. And the purpose of that program is to restore appropriate conditions for steelhead trout in the Los Angeles River system. And it's a very exciting program that's looking at a 4.8-mile stretch of downtown Los Angeles right by the Arroyo Seco confluence. And it is actually looking at ways to accommodate native fish in that stretch of the LA River, which connects directly up to the Arroyo Seco. So the Arroyo Seco will be a very important part of that project, of the success of that project in terms of establishing the connection between the mountains, the mountain watershed, and the Los Angeles River, the main stem of the Los Angeles River. So we wanted to start first with a discussion of the Arroyo Seco Canyon project, which a lot of you probably know about, and maybe some of you don't. And let's go into reports then on what's happened with the Arroyo Seco Canyon project. There was a hearing before the hearing officer in the beginning of January with regard to the final environmental impact report for the Arroyo Seco Canyon project, and we presented a lot of information about elements of the environmental impact report which were deficient, and basically all of that was ignored by the hearing officer. The environmental process with regard to these projects is a very curious one, because the city goes through a process, City of Pasadena, and they have hearings, and then they take information on the draft environmental impact report, and that happened in the summer. And then finally in December, right before Christmas, they released the final environmental impact report, and it was basically 9/10 of it was devoted to refuting everything that all of the people who commented in the summer had reported. So it actually went to a hearing officer in the beginning of January. The hearing officer basically ignored all the information that had been presented, both as comments to the draft environmental impact report and also to the final environmental impact report as well. So after that happened, some of us got together and decided that we really needed to appeal that process and to force the discussion to move ahead to the Zoning Appeals Board, which is what will happen. And then if the Zoning Appeals Board decides against us at that time, we will appeal again and appeal it to the City Council. And at that time, the City Council will review the environmental impact report and all the comments that are on it. So we candidly expect that, knowing how fixed the process is, that we're not going to get a good opinion from the Zoning Appeals Board, and that we probably will go to the City Council, which is appropriate, actually, for the City Council to be making decisions on such major, important issues. So that's a large part of the reason why we went ahead with the appeal, was to excuse my dog there. We went ahead with the appeal in order to push the item to the full City Council. So let me, while I go grab my dog, let me introduce Crystal Baldwin, who's been very interesting and very interested in the Arroyo and in planning in Harmonia. And she made some very interesting comments with regard to the final environmental impact report. And so I asked her to come tonight and to give us a few words on what her concerns were about the final environmental impact report and why she thinks that there need to be further consideration of issues with regard to the final environmental impact report. So let me unmute you, Crystal.
There, I unmuted myself.
Yeah, now you can do it.
Well, I think the reason Tim wanted me on this call is I'm a multi-generation Pasadenian. And when we were talking about this project, I was reflecting back on the fact that my grandfather used to fish in the Arroyo, that there were once fish and frogs and all kinds of things. And we have a whole trunk full of photos of the family having picnics along the Arroyo. And to me, we have kind of neglected the fact that this is a real treasure in our community. It's our own Grand Canyon, if you will. And we mustn't let it become a sports field or Hugh Bowles sent me a letter about how it's now being used for motorcycle races down in the basin without any thought of all the plants and the species that exist there. So what we're trying to do really is to protect what is natural about it and bring it back to what to where people in our community can be proud of it and can feel a part of it. We tend, I feel, to neglect the nature part of Pasadena. And the irony of it is that I think now more than ever, people are realizing the value of nature. So let's work with them. Let's protect the streams. Let's bring this back as a wonderful treasure and not let the water be depleted. The water is the essence of it all.
Well, thank you very much, Crystal, and thank you for supporting the appeal as well. Another individual who supported the appeal was Hugh Bowles, who has been involved in protecting Haamungna for 30 years or more. And so we wanted to give Hugh the opportunity as well to say a few words about what his concerns are with regard to the project at this point. Let's see if we can find Hugh here.
There he is.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
you.
Okay, so my name's Hugh Bowles, and I actually live right on the southwest corner of Pasadena, right on the border there with Pasadena, and have the privilege of overlooking the Arroyo, so I get this sort of bird's eye view of absolutely everything that goes on there. And I've been involved, since 2003 at the earliest, to try and impress upon the city and Pasadena Water and Power the need to start restoring natural flows to the Arroyo Seco rather than diverting the water into impound basins or spreading basins, whatever we call them. And that is not necessarily because it's environmentally sound, I mean, it is, but also because the available science that has been done suggests that that is the best way to conserve our local water supply. In 1995, Pasadena Water and Power hired Converse Consultants West to do a hydrologic study in the Arroyo above the dam. And the study included an analysis of the percolation rates of all the different soils that are in the basin. And the stream actually sits on the most porous structures, which is large boulders, gravel, loose sand, unconsolidated material. And they found that they measured that the stream can absorb 3,600 gallons of water per day per square foot. This is sort of nature in a hot, dry climate. This is nature's way of getting the water into the underground as quickly as possible. Now, the spreading basins, they sit on exactly those same structures. They're right up in the same area. But Converse found that they were by orders of magnitude worse at absorbing water and actually only percolate water at less than 40 gallons per day per square foot. And this is largely due to siltation and then the compaction that occurs when they have to get bulldozers and heavy equipment in to theoretically break up the soils in the basin. However, the wholesale diversion of the stream into these impound basins, these spreading basins that are very inefficient at absorbing water, actually leaves a lot of our drinking water sitting out in the open in the hot sun where it evaporates and starts to stagnate very quickly. However, and so the recommendation is that we should, to conserve our local water supply, we should really be arguing to leave as much water in the stream as we possibly can. However, the PWP dam engineers just don't want to hear this because it conjures up in their mind the image of water flowing down to the dam, pooling behind the dam, and then the county lifting up the sluice gates and the water all flowing off down to the ocean. But that ignores the fact that water is only flowing down to the dam for a very small period of time throughout the year. And for around 99% of the time, the flows in the stream are less than 5 cubic feet per second. And if those flows were actually left in the stream rather than diverted, they would be absorbed at 3,600 gallons a day per square foot. They would be absorbed almost a mile before the water would get anywhere close to the dam, because the stream just sort of simply guzzles the water up. Unfortunately, PWP don't want to engage with that science that is available, and they're determined to pour more concrete into a California stream, and they insist on draining the stream completely during the hot summer months. And effectively, so they then percolate our drinking water through spreading basins, and the new ones are going to sit on top of the old JPL parking lot. And they claim that increasing the diversion is going to increase the replenishment of the aquifer, yet they cannot provide any science to prove that. And when challenged, they simply say, well, efficiency is not about how quickly the water gets into the aquifer. And they claim that the law prevents them from looking at any alternative, although they refuse to go to the Raymond Basin Management Board to suggest a more environmentally favorable alternative that would actually leverage the superior percolation capacity of the stream. So the goal in relation to the appeal, as Tim was saying, is really to emphasize that the environmentally superior alternative is for PWP to be able to claim pumping credit for water that is left in the stream, that the stream can absorb before it actually reaches the dam. Not to get involved in the sort of percolation of water behind the dam, although that does occur, but to allow them to claim credit for water that is absorbed before the water gets to the dam. And we've suggested that, you know, a good marker would be whatever the water can absorb up to the point of Johnson Field. That would allow a very good sort of fish habitat friendly and riparian habitat friendly environment to exist all the way up to beyond, up to the JPL bridge and beyond. And this would help prevent the potential destruction of the last remaining riparian habitats that are in the arroyo that will suffer when the stream is drained into these new spreading basins. And it will also help mitigate the loss of riparian habitats from the Devil's Gate cleanout. And so the efficiency, really the project needs to rely on this efficient mechanism that nature has provided for getting water into the underground so that we can then use it to our advantage. So the appeal is really, I see it as being a way to apply pressure. Ultimately, it's going to go up to city council to bring our water conservation mechanisms in line with the science that is available, and to do more science to confirm what we have, and then also to make sure we're meeting the needs of the environment for all the reasons that Crystal outlined. Okay, Tim, that was it.
Great, thanks very much, Hugh. Now, for those who might want to know a little bit more about the Canyon project, we've got some slides here.
Yeah, I'm happy to relay those questions while we try to figure out the share screen situation. We had a couple of really interesting questions in the chat. First from Levi Brewster. Hi, Levi. Nice to see you, and nice to hear from you. He asked, how do local native plants relate to the percolation? Hugh, excuse me, can you comment on that, or else I can actually, if you're interested.
Go for it, Parker.
I'll give an immediate comment. The spreading basins are maintained as if they're slabs of concrete. I mean, the Pasadena Water and Power allows nothing to grow in them. So that's my immediate comment. I'll allow someone else to weigh in.
Yes, and I would also comment that native plants, through evolution over millions of years to tolerate and to work with the weather and geological conditions that we have in the basin, in the Haramanga Basin itself, are extremely well adapted for existing there and living there and thriving there. And they do a lot actually to draw water down into the basin. Their root structures actually assist in percolation by directing water down towards the basin itself, underneath the groundwater basin, beneath the actual canyon mouth and the alluvial sage scrub habitat. And they are much more efficient, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of ecological and hydrological scientific opinions, that they do a lot more to bring water down into the groundwater supply than would a man-made structure, which like the spreading basins themselves collect a lot of hydrophobic sediments, very fine silts, which tend to distract water from entering the basin, and instead you lose a lot to evaporation when you don't have a good plant system with good good root systems, which bring water down into the soils and help establish also good mycological communities, which are really important. Also the fungal communities, which all associate with the root systems of all of our different plants, also create like a sponge-like material, which absorb water, hold it in the system, and allow it to eventually get down into the groundwater basin, which is really important. I now see Tim's got his share.
Yeah, let's do just a quick review of what is, I hope, what's in the Arroyo Seco Canyon project. So, but first, before even we get to that, I want to point out that those who are interested in more detail about all of the different aspects that we're discussing this evening can find a very interesting resource guide, really, on our website, which is at, you can see the link there at www.arroyoseco.org /watercrisis.htm. And there you'll find all the information that you could ever want to know about specifically Pasadena's water situation now, which we describe as a crisis, about groundwater and the importance of groundwater and what all that means and all the concepts with regard to that, about Pasadena's 25-year water plan, and then also about the Arroyo Seco Canyon project itself. Now, the Canyon project, is in Hahamungna, right at the northern part of the Hahamungna Basin, right before the JPL bridge there. And Hahamungna really is so important because it's the critical juncture between where the mountains enter the urban plain on its way to the Los Angeles River. So there's really 5 unique habitat zones in that area, and it's home to several endangered and threatened species. It's a very important wildlife corridor in our region, and really it's the most special place, most special environmental treasure in our region. So it's important for water resources, habitat, and nature appreciation as well. It's really the gateway to the San Gabriel Mountains and the connection to the Los Angeles River. The Canyon project has a variety of different elements to it. One of them is a dam and diversion thing, and then also they're going to expand the spreading basins. You can see that they already have a large number of spreading basins in the Hahamungna Basin on the east side of the basin. They're going to expand the spreading basins to take over a large part of the old JPL parking lot, which was established 30 years ago, and when it was put in was only supposed to be there for 3 years, of course, and then it was supposed to be restored to nature. And now they're going to convert it from a parking lot to these expanded spreading basins. But you can see from the 2 diagrams here that show the Hahamungna area, when you put together the area that Water and Power wants to expand, basically to degrade habitat or the most potentially important habitat zone in the area, and put it together with the other spreading basins they already have, and then you put that together with the maintenance area that the county's going to go in and every year knock down the habitat in that area, you can see that a large part of the environmental heart of Hahamungna is being destroyed. And that's, I think, the reason a lot of people have reacted so strongly to this project. So the project includes dam and diversion replacement. It includes expansion of the spreading basins at the mouth of the arroyo. And the environmental impact report, as we reported earlier, has been approved tentatively by the hearing officer, and it was appealed by the Arroyo Seco Foundation, Pasadena Audubon Society, Hugh Bowles, Ken Cools, and a variety of other individuals who have supported the program, the appeal. And the appeal will be held by the Board of Zoning Appeals soon. We don't have a date yet for it, and then it will be considered by the City Council. Now, I wanted to give you an idea of what were the things, why did the Arroyo Seco Foundation, what did we feel was missing in the environmental impact report? We'll go through this quickly. But we said they failed to identify and include an evaluation of the condition of the ponding and the impact of holding water behind the dam, which was a concession that we were able to get from the county with regard to the sediment excavation program, is that in the future, they're going to leave water behind the dam until at least July 1st. If you've been up to Hahamungna recently, they are now releasing water from the dam right now. So the concession that we sought does not take effect until they have finished their excavation program. But that's going to have a tremendous impact on conservation in that area, and it's going to ensure that water is not just going to be flowing to the ocean as they feared, but rather the water is largely going to percolate within the Hahamungna Basin, as Hugh described. They also didn't talk about the adverse and very significant impact on the Raymond Basin groundwater levels that will be caused by the project, which Ken Cools is going to speak about in just a minute. It didn't really give the public the opportunity to comment meaningfully upon changes that have occurred in the project. And it also does not provide for any fish passage or adequate stream accommodation for potential fish populations in the future. Now, historically, there have been fish in the Arroyo Seco for millions of years, and we're working to restore conditions for fish in the watershed. And so to build a 5-foot dam, as they want to do, that will totally block fish passage during the dry part of spring, basically from April through June, when the fish are moving, is a very unwise and irresponsible thing to do. And yet that is what the Water and Power Department intends to do. And it also omitted information about the potential existence of fish in the arroyo, or to support its finding that there are no fish. They actually took the position that there are no fish in the arroyo. Now, I think if that's true, it's the first time in several million years, and we need to assess why are there no fish in the arroyo and see who is responsible for that. So because of these significant gaps in the environmental impact report, we felt that the hearing officer's determination needed to be withdrawn, that the final environmental impact report should be recirculated to all agencies and the public, and that we should have the opportunity to have a full review of those for the public and for regulatory agencies to take a look at the changed project. And now we move to Ken Cools, who provided really excellent comments on the Arroyo Seco Canyon project and has documented the detrimental impacts that this project will have on the Raymond Basin. So at this point, it's time to give Ken the floor here. And let's see, where's Ken? There we are. All right, now if you unmute yourself, we're in good shape, Ken. Ken is a veteran engineer who has served with the Metropolitan Water District for many years, and before that, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Go ahead, Ken.
Well, there we go. Thanks, Tim. I'm going to be talking tonight about the process that went into Pasadena formulating the WSRP. There was a group of people that were invited to join as stakeholders with Pasadena in a series of meetings. You'll see the list here, 13 people. And myself and Maury Wolfson both were in that group. So I'm speaking from personal experience. And we started this in 2018. This is kind of a roadmap to how they hope to get to the final plan. There were a series of 5 meetings that were scheduled that at the end, you see there, comes up with a CIP, Capital Improvement Program, and then subsequently the WSRP. So I'm going to be stepping through these 5 meetings. So I'm going to show you a timeline. The first stakeholder meeting was in October in 2018. And at that meeting, it was just kind of a get to know you meeting and help inform some of the folks who, there were a number of folks that were completely unfamiliar with the water system and with the water parameters that are involved in developing the plan. So it was more kind of an orientation meeting, a first day at camp, if you will. The second meeting was the following December. A little bit more of, welcome to camp, but it got more into talking about how the participants saw priorities of things like, what they call cultural values, how the folks felt about different attributes of water supply. And there was some orientation to the facilities. We went to see one of the reservoirs, still kind of an orientation meeting. But interestingly enough, we later learned that at the same time that meeting was occurring, Pasadena was getting a report from a group called Zanero. And that was really, well, first of all, we didn't know about that, and it wasn't publicly released. But what we now know about it, it was a report that was prepared for the city of Pasadena. I'm going to be referring to the Raymond Basin Management Board. For those of you that aren't familiar with the adjudication, the Raymond Basin Management Board was appointed by the court to administer the Raymond Basin judgment. It's made up of the party, the pumpers in the Raymond Basin judgment, including Pasadena, who has a vote on the Raymond Basin Management Board. So this is sort of like a board of directors, if you will, to manage the basin. This report came up with the conclusion that the Raymond Basin isn't managed in a sustainable manner. and it's under threat of spreading contamination. It recommends to Pasadena that Pasadena, as well as the management board, have to change their course of action, take a different direction, because otherwise it could cause permanent failure of the basin. This was a graphic from the report. I believe the graphic was actually prepared by perhaps Stetson, one of the consultants to the Raymond Basin Management Board. But it shows the depth to groundwater at a particular well in what's referred to as the Pasadena area. And I want you to keep your eye on the black line here and the red line here. Those depict the decline of the groundwater basin. And it shows pretty linear decline beginning in the 40s. The initial judgment that the court judgment that established the safe yield was in 1944, and safe yield is considered to be the amount of water you can pump from the basin without causing a lowering of the groundwater table. So that safe yield was set in 1944. And this was the level that it used as the baseline for measuring. So theoretically, you would expect that the safe yield would result in groundwater levels that went above and below that dashed line. Back in 1955, at the request of the parties to the judgment, the court actually modified the judgment and increased the safe yield for the basin. And it would have set a different metric. This would have been the new metric for that safe yield. But what you can see is that obviously safe yield hasn't worked. The dashed line there is declining dramatically. And it's actually gotten to the point where you're seeing some water quality problems. Some of the producers are having trouble with their wells in terms of the intakes at the screens. Now, what Zanero did talk about, however, was this magenta line. They reversed engineered the actual groundwater levels and said, well, what if the basin judgment hadn't been amended in 1955? What would the pumping have looked like if they were pumping under the original safe yield? And what you see there is that it pretty well matches the metrics for, you know, a reasonable safe yield. You can conclude from this that basically it was a mistake to amend the judgment in 1955. Some of the things that Zanero said in the report, and I won't try not to go through all of it because it's kind of a lengthy discussion, but seeming lack of urgency. Only limited efforts have been implemented to solve the problem. The actions that have been taken have failed to get the desired results. The Raymond Basin Management Board goals and objectives are unclear. Again, no urgency or effective practices in place. And the city of Pasadena, their consultant told them that they have not been proactive or assertive in their efforts to improve the basin management and sustainability. They acknowledge the importance of the groundwater basin to the community, but point out that the current trends are not good for water quality and supply, and that during emergencies, the use of the basin may not serve the community. And then lastly, they advise PWP that they need to work with the Raymond Basin proactive manner, and that you know, in a rigorous approach to coming up with a solution. So getting back to the timeline, the third stakeholder meeting was a little bit more productive in terms of making progress. actually started talking about the importance of different solutions, or what I'll call plan components, to put into the WSRP. Had a Lego exercise, which was quite interesting, and that included some high school students. And then the subsequent meeting, meeting 4, began to get into the nitty gritty. That's where they talked about portfolios. They developed 6 portfolios, and talked about the how the 6 portfolios met the values that were talked about in the earlier meetings. And this is an example of one of the portfolios. It's portfolio F. I picked this one because it's actually the portfolio that was selected to include in the WSRP. And I won't go into this in detail because there'll be more detail later, but I do want to point out a couple of things. First of all, there's no cost information for the individual components in this graphic. And there's no, it doesn't say for each of these components how much yield they're expected to have, how many acre feet of water they're expected to produce. They're grouped into supply and to production components. Total capital cost for the whole project, the whole plan is almost $430 million, but the capital cost for the supply component is about $78 million. Just for those of you who aren't familiar with the term acre feet, it's a typical cost per acre foot is a typical way of comparing opportunities to implement plans. 1 acre foot is roughly an area or a volume that's 208 feet by 208 feet by 1 foot deep. That's amount of water comprising an acre foot. So here's the same graphic, but overlaying on this. This is the graphic that was produced in the meeting number 4, where Pasadena evaluated the 6 portfolios and came up with a weighted analysis. There's no real units on the Y scale. It's just simply a weighted value. And they looked at things like supply reliability, resiliency, health and safety, the stuff down in the legend at the bottom. Some things to look at here. There was a real difference between Portfolio B, for example, and Portfolio F in terms of supply reliability and resiliency. And that's striking. The reliability of the groundwater, if you will, was considered to be 4 times more reliable than imported water in this case. Having been a former Metropolitan Water District employee, that caught my attention. In terms of health and safety, again, Portfolio B compared to Portfolio C, D, and E, and F was only half in terms of health and safety. And of course, I don't understand that because all water produced and served to the customers has to be healthful and safe. And I think that's the way the other participants looked at it, but that doesn't seem to play out in terms of the weighting of health and safety. Another factor was self-sufficiency. Not really sure what that means, and I wasn't sure at the time, but you can see that Portfolio B and Portfolio F dramatically different in terms of something called self-sufficiency. Flexibility, adaptability, another sort of qualitative term. You see a dramatic difference between, in this case, Portfolio C and Portfolio B in that regard. And then lastly, something called community values and quality of life, very qualitative, dramatic differences between not only Portfolio B, but for Portfolio C and Portfolio F. But more striking in this analysis is when you look at the Portfolio C ranking and Portfolio F, there's only a slight difference improvement in the scoring for Portfolio F, but Pasadena seems to have believed that that was a compelling reason to select Portfolio F. As the stakeholders were discussing this graphic, the question arose, well, you know, it is a very small difference between Portfolio C and Portfolio F. Help us understand why one is superior to the other, and suggest that if Pasadena were to provide the stakeholders with more cost and yield information, that might inform a rational decision. However, that didn't happen at the time. There was no discussion in that meeting. So meeting 5 was supposed to be directed at talking about going forward with a selected portfolio. What are the financial issues, and how would you implement the portfolio? What are the obstacles to implementing the portfolio? But they did show this graphic, which was in response to the request from meeting 4 for cost and yield information. However, they never discussed this graphic in the meeting. They just handed out the information to the participants, and at the end of the meeting said, well, we don't have any more time available in the room reservation to talk about it. So this information never was discussed with the stakeholders. And as a practical matter, Pasadena selected the Portfolio F really without affirmation by the stakeholders, and just unilaterally chose it. So I'm showing that same table here blown up so you can read it. And I'm going to walk through this. This top table is the table that I just showed you from meeting 5. But I've constructed a similar table using information from the final WSRP down below. You'll see that I didn't include any information on the O&M costs and the production costs and the cost per acre foot, simply because I couldn't reconcile the information in the WSRP with the what was shown to the stakeholders, and there's no way to translate that. So what you see here is the difference. The cost actually went down from the stakeholders meeting to the final WSRP by about $3 million capital. However, when you look at a couple of the components that major components that changed, what you see is the conservation in terms of cost. They reduced the conservation costs by about 1/3. Of course, that is striking. On the other hand, they increased the amount of money being allocated to well improvements. And those are the two major changes in cost. However, going over to the supply yield, the amount of water that would be produced through the component measure, you see a change. I see an increase in this case for the Arroyo Seco Canyon project. You see an increase in a project to take water over to Eaton Canyon. You see a reduction in the Arroyo Seco pumpback project, a reduction in this component, a reduction in a non-potable project. You don't need to know what's in these projects, but the conservation as a practical matter is the same, a slight bump up, but a reduction of $12 million in the program with a roughly equivalent yield, if you will. Very striking is the fact that what they predicted to be something like almost 16,000 acre feet of new yield for replenishment projects, actually it doesn't match. It's mismatched by 7,300. The amount of yield that they had in the original table is 7,300 acre feet more than in the final WSRP. As we discussed earlier, we've talked about the ASCP, and in another analysis, I've shown that it's roughly going to lose about 400 acre feet a year as a result of the project to the groundwater basin. And these three projects will rely on the same pumping credits that the ASCP is going to rely on, and with likely a potentially similar result in terms of loss of yield to the basin. They originally had certain Arroyo Seco diversions going into the local non-potable project. They removed that, but the yield didn't change, neither did the cost. They just simply removed the supply. And of course, the amount of pumping that's shown there is roughly the adjudicated safe yield, but they don't consider the fact that there really needs to be something, as reported by Zanero, done to remediate the basin and get the safe yield back up again. Additionally, there were 2 projects that were in the table that were shown to the stakeholders that got eliminated, magically just went away. And then lastly, in their analysis, they had used the cost of groundwater as sorry about that. The cost of groundwater as being 200 acre feet per year, $200 per acre foot for pumping. When in fact, at the same time, in another document, they were saying the cost of groundwater pumping is $500, or groundwater production is $500 an acre foot. So basically what you see here is a mismatch between the numbers that were used in the analysis for the stakeholders group and what's in the WSRP final. But most notable is the fact that the issues related to the groundwater. What they say in the WSRP is that Pasadena is going to continue working with the Raymond Basin Management Board to try to solve the problems. But they're going to assume that the groundwater supplies, the full safe yield is available for pumping in the WSRP. Basically, that says they're going to have business as usual under the WSRP. They're going to continue pumping. They'll try to see what they can do with the Raymond Basin Management Board, but it's not a major initiative. And I'll go back to the Zanero report language. Lack of urgency. Objectives are unclear. Pasadena has not been proactive or assertive, and that Pasadena has to change course. And if they don't do that, then the groundwater will continue to decline. So I want to go back and show you the graphic that we saw before that has the weighted information for the selection of the plan. It looks exactly the same in the final WSRP. They didn't make any changes to the weighting analysis after the stakeholder meetings. So back to the timeline. Coincidentally, on the same day that we had the last stakeholder meeting, one of the stakeholders was provided a copy of the Zanero report, but it wasn't done as part of the meeting. It was done, in fact, it was transmitted after the meeting. PWP briefed the EAC in October. There were 2 community meetings, and I believe they were in November. And the EAC subsequently wrote a memo to PWP, and you see the transmittal of that here. Basically what they say is that they're concerned about conservation. They're concerned about the decline of the groundwater. They think more needs to be done to look at some of these issues, and they're not receptive to the plan as drafted. So there was a 6th unscheduled stakeholder meeting in September. A lot of time had passed, and I think they just simply wanted to get the stakeholders back together again and kind of warm them up for the pending WSRP. And they issued a draft WSRP in advance of that meeting so the stakeholders could look at it. The final WSRP came out in December. And what we're told is the meeting, which was scheduled for March 9th. We learned just the other day that it's being scheduled for April 13th. It's an error on my part. And the city council will be the Monday following the MSC meeting in April. And what we ask, or what I ask, is that Pasadena shouldn't commit to spending money for projects that are going to depend on the full adjudicated safe yield, or projects that are counting on earning pumping credits until the solution can be found for stabilizing the Raymond Basin groundwater levels. And with that, I'll take any questions, or we can wait until the end of the meeting.
Well, I think this is a good time to take questions. Are there, you dealt with a lot of weighty issues there, Ken. Thank you very much. How about it? Do people have specific questions with regard to Ken's presentation?
I think Ken was pretty thorough because I haven't seen any questions since he began speaking. We have a couple of questions from before that, but nothing on Ken's area of expertise, which to me is a testament to his own thoroughness.
Okay, then.
He
just said,
Something in chat.
PWP, I think I'm talking of it. Someone's asking a question. Go ahead. Ken, have PWP responded to those criticisms?
Sorry, have they what?
Have PWP responded to the criticisms about maintaining a safe yield? And
there's not been an opportunity yet. We have made the presentation on the ASCP that we saw, you saw in an earlier meeting. We have talked to them about that, and they're clear. We've met with them, and they clearly understand that our interest is in first restoring the Raymond Basin stability before they implement projects. That clearly we've told them that, and clearly they don't seem to care.
Yeah, that was my point. They haven't sort of they've sort of ignored it, or they haven't responded positively towards that.
Right, and I think the fact that we've appealed the ASCP hearing is sort of the evidence of that. They're not persuaded that they don't believe that my analysis is correct regarding the impact on the basin.
Well, I think a lot of what Ken said was so important because one of the central themes they're saying is that there was a very thorough approach towards community involvement in the development of the WSRP. And as you can see, there were a lot of gaps in what was actually presented to the stakeholder group, which only had 13 people. There were two community meetings that occurred towards the end of December 2019. I didn't hear about them. I don't know. Did anybody hear about those meetings before they occurred? I've asked how many people attended those meetings, and they're mum on that. I don't think very many people attended those meetings. So to say that there's been a thorough approach towards planning and with a lot of community involvement is really a distortion of the process. Now, of course, the COVID thing has really made communication very difficult, but they really haven't had any public meetings to discuss these issues. And the stuff that they report in their comments on the draft environmental impact report and then on the final environmental impact report is just, it's very dismissive. They don't really grapple with the issues at all, except to say, well, it's our professional judgment that, and that we're supposed to trust them for that. I think there's a lot of holes in their analysis.
My impression has definitely been that they're actually using the COVID crisis and its apparent impediments in doing communication with the public to their own advantage and being able to avoid doing this. Whereas we see that we're able to create these Zoom meetings very easily and bring in members of the public to discuss these issues without any problem. But I think they just would rather not have the discussion at all.
Now, I see that Mark Hunter has a really good question. He says the Raymond Basin, and Mark is with the Pasadena Audubon Society, which joined us in the appeal. Thanks very much, Audubon. The Raymond Basin Management Board members can petition the court to modify the judgment. Does anyone outside the RBMB have standing to ask the court to open the judgment for renegotiation? That's an excellent question, and I'm not really sure what the answer to that is. I think that that really is the flaw in the Raymond Basin adjudication. Was not only did they change it in a dangerous way in 1955, but that they haven't reevaluated it or recalibrated what is the safe yield since 1955. And there have been tremendous changes in local conditions that affect water use, and we're now in the era of climate change, and yet the calibration that they're using is based on a failed plan that it has not arrested the drawdown of the basin. So it's your point is very well taken. What really needs to be done is that there needs to be a real consideration of changing what is the safe yield and getting the pumpers to all agree together to do that. That has not occurred. Now, the Raymond Basin Management Board has tried, they've done some studies, and they've tried to do a variety of things in order to arrest the drawdown of the basin. They have not succeeded. And really, the most important criteria of the health of the Raymond Basin is what's the groundwater level. And it's inescapable that the groundwater level is now 250 feet lower than it was in 1944 when they approved their initial plan. So it was a concern in 1944 when that happened, and establishing a safe yield or a sustainable program was a very important priority for Pasadena and all of the regional agencies in 1944. So why is it now not an urgent concern? Indeed, it's a very serious crisis now that the groundwater level is 250 feet lower than it was at that time. And it's really something that Pasadena needs to open up its eyes to and stop hiding the ball, stop pretending that they're doing a good program that's really going to manage the basin effectively, because the results indicate otherwise.
Yeah, Tim, I think there is, I mean, in regard to the Arroyo Seco Canyon project, from reading the Raymond Basin judgment and how practice is done today, there is provision in that judgment now for percolation in the natural stream. And the Lincoln Avenue Water Company, I've confirmed, actually get all their pumping credit based on the measurement from 2 gauging stations in stream flow with absolutely no diversion. So I think there is some, I think opening up the judgment is probably a long-term objective. I think in the immediate term, I would feel inclined to try and pin down the Raymond Basin Management Board to say, look, why can't you allocate pumping credit to Pasadena Water and Power based on stream flow, much in the same way as Lincoln Avenue Water Company get their credit, and then also point out that that provision in the judgment that does allow for percolation credit in the natural stream, albeit it says the stream has to be flowing toward a spreading basin or either a new one or existing one, but there is some wiggle room there. The challenge is PWP don't want to listen to that. They say Lincoln Avenue Water Company's got nothing to do with our project, so that's a false equivalency. And then they say the Raymond Basin Management Board has nothing to do with our project either. And that's sort of where the impasse lies. I think there's quite a bit of flexibility within the judgment at the moment to really assess whether at least a starting point is to leave flows in the stream up to an agreed upon point where the water's not going to hit the dam. And then if we can get past that hurdle, then open up the Raymond Basin judgment.
Yeah, Hugh, I think that what you're saying would be a step forward. However, I think Ken Cools has in previous presentations really established something that's very important to realize, and that is when they're diverting water from the stream, they're not replenishing the basin. Now they say, oh, well, we only get credit for 60 or 80% of that water. We can pump it out afterwards. But think about it for a minute. They're taking water that naturally would replenish the Raymond Basin, and because they're putting it into spreading basins, or even if they did it within the stream, they're then going to pump most of that water out anyway. So they're taking the natural replenishment of the basin and robbing it. All you have to do is look at what is the groundwater level. When you see the groundwater level keep declining, it's because they've set up a system to get around the intent of the adjudication, which was to stabilize the level in the basin. So I actually think that Ken has pretty definitively proven that the Arroyo Seco Canyon project, whether they use spreading basins or the stream itself, will have a detrimental impact on the Raymond Basin groundwater levels. And I think that's ultimately the big issue.
Tim, can I intercede here?
Sure.
I'd make the observation that the Raymond Basin Management Board doesn't have to go back to the court to come up with solutions and find
Good point.
fix these problems. They could, but it doesn't require adjudication. If the Raymond Basin Management Board wanted to find the solutions, as you've suggested, for example, they could do that if they wanted to.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to get it short.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the challenge is PWP claim in their documentation that by diverting more water into the spreading basins, they're going to improve aquifer recharge. Well, I asked Brad Bowman at the scoping meeting for the ASCP, I said, how much of the water that you put in the spreading basins actually goes into the aquifer? And he looked at me quizzically and said, well, we assume it does.
That to me,
That was their answer.
That to me is extremely telling. They don't even want to look at the actual numbers. They just want to be able to give themselves credit based on what they're diverting, without any actual science behind it. And it's completely disingenuous. It's insane to me. I don't understand how anybody could actually in good conscience get behind such a plan.
Now, Jill asks a very important question. She says, can safe yield be revisited without taking climate change into account? And obviously that would be irresponsible to not take climate change into account, but actually the plan that they've developed doesn't take climate change into account, because what they did, they based it on past historical supply characteristics and conditions, and they didn't make any attempt at all to look into the future. Now, there's some language in there that talks about climate change, but when they actually made their projections of future supplies and such, they didn't really evaluate it in terms of the range of detrimental impacts that are likely to occur from climate change. So this is not what people in the water business call a resilient plan, because it doesn't really take into account climate change and what its impact is likely to be. So if the groundwater level has been falling the way that it has for the last 80 years, 250 feet in the last 80 years, if it continues doing that in the next 25 years of their plan, it's going to create very serious problems within the groundwater basin. Problems of water quality, potential subsidence of land, they're going to lose wells, it's going to be much more expensive. There's just lots of things that are going to go wrong if the groundwater level keeps declining. It's really in everybody's interest to restore a sustainable level within the basin, to at least stop the decline in the basin. But actually, we really long-term need to move towards restoring the level of groundwater in the basin.
Did you want me to?
Are there any other questions? Do you see any? Well, Maury Wolfson has some things to say about next steps. Levi shot in a question there. Looks like there are short-term economic benefits to construction projects and pumping more water. Well, the short-term benefit really of using local water is that it's cheaper, candidly, than other supplies. That's just kind of the reality. But it is short-term. I believe that the era of cheap water is really over, and that we really need to move towards other steps in terms of conservation, a greater emphasis on conservation, landscape transformation, where we use native plants in order to transform the landscaping of Pasadena and Southern California, recycling water, reusing sanitation water, and other steps like that that are really part of modern water management, which really are given short shrift in the water system and resources plan.
Did you want me to go to the next portion?
Yeah, Maura, you're up.
To say hello to everybody, and I want to thank Tim for putting this together. It's exciting to see as many people having the interest that there is, and this is evolving. We've recently received news that the timeline has been adjusted, and that's to our advantage. When we assess who might be in favor of this plan, it's hard to imagine that there's a natural constituency that is really going to be pushing for this plan. It's going to be basically the Pasadena Water and Power, because they develop it, they own it. But we're not up against like opposition that is opposing us. And so what we've been attempting to do is to get the facts out and to get PWP to respond. They eventually will, but it's not up to us to get PWP to respond. It's going to be up to the city council. And that's where I'm going with my presentations. Going to be quite short. I hope that you can all see this.
Yes.
Okay. I just have a couple of slides, and it's mainly aimed at the topic of what the decision-making process is, and of course it's the city council. And as you all know, we are discussing this water systems and resource plan, and it's a 25-year plan, $427 million. Now they're going to be looking at $427 million, and the city is right now in a world of hurt with a lot of cancellations of Rose Bowl, a lot of income in the city, restaurants closed. They've got cutbacks that are happening, and they're going to be looking at that, and they're going to be thinking sticker shock. Essentially, what I, as an individual, have come up with as what I would be asking, at least at this juncture, is that the council should reject that supply portion of the plan and basically direct PWP staff to go and work with the Raymond Basin Management Board to develop a plan to stabilize the decline curve of the Raymond Basin. So that's very much what Tim and Ken and others have been saying. I also make a big point about the importance of the Zanero report, and that's been covered, is that it was commissioned by PWP. They had it for the past couple of years. And it has a lot of very interesting things to say. You could study the Zanero report. It's about 10 to 12 pages long by going to the Arroyo Seco Foundation's website. The timeline, which we just learned, is that the Municipal Services Committee is going to be looking at this plan, and perhaps even the Arroyo Seco Canyon project. We don't know for sure about that, but definitely the Water Systems Resource Plan will be looking at, the MSC will be looking at the plan. After the Municipal Services Committee looks at the plan, they will be making a recommendation to either take it back to the drawing boards or to move it forward with some modifications and take it to the City Council by April 19th. I'd like to then quickly go back to what we've been talking about, which is this decline curve. And, you know, at the risk of a lot of repetition, essentially, this is the measurement from 2010, from 1910 to 2020. And you know, it was going down very, very quickly. That's when they did the judgment. They saw that and they said, oh, we've got a crisis. This is urgent. We better come up with an adjudication. That lasted for a while. They came up with a new adjudication in 55, and it just has kept on going down. There have been a few blips here and there, but this graph ends at 2020. And I think it's just very natural to ask the question of PWP, well, as you project how much water is still in the basin, what do you expect this decline curve to be at in these out years, especially out to the year 2045, which is what the plan is. And when I ask that question, I do not get an answer back. they basically, pat me on the back and say, well, obviously you must understand this is all future, and everything we would tell you would just be aspirational or something else. So we are not going to give you an answer. And I'm asking you all in your own way to ask these common sense questions about the future of this basin. Ask PWP, ask them for a straight answer. So I find this to be quite interesting because PWP, to my knowledge, and there are those on this call who've been around for a lot longer than I have, who might know, but to my knowledge, this may have been the first time that PWP in their 100-year history has actually revealed this decline curve to the public. So I'm going to, I've been focusing primarily on this decline curve and trying to get some answers from PWP. So my question is what can you do? Well, it really is going to come down to the fact that the mayor and the city council members are going to be addressing this in a matter of 2 months from now. And I think that as many citizens who ask questions about their concerns about Pasadena's water future, the more it will stimulate the members of the city council to feel obligated and responsible that they should be kind of on their feet and understand these things. We're going to be supplying the city council with a lot of questions, and we hope that they ask the questions not only of PWP, but they ask the questions of people in the community. So I'm just going to quickly let you know that this presentation with all these numbers and all will be on the Arroyo Seco Foundation website. Tim is recording this message. If you want to read who you can get in touch with to contact the mayor, these are 3 people that you could be in touch with. I want to mention the Municipal Services Committee. They serve as the people that will vet the plan before it goes off to the full city council. So Andy Wilson is the chair, and Tyrone Hampton is on there, as well as Felicia Williams, and she's brand new, and I think she has really good background. And I think that the more that we provide education and information to these individuals, the better off we're going to be, because they will be making recommendations to the full city council. And as far as the timeline goes, they could be there as early as April 13th. So the time to get in touch with them really is now. You really should not wait too much longer, because they have a lot of different issues on their plate, but this is a big one, $427 million. So what I had put together on this presentation, and this is for future reference, not to take a lot of notes on now, but this will be on the Arroyo Seco Foundation website. It shows you each district, District 1, and of course Tyrone is on the Municipal Services Committee, and so is Felicia Williams in District 2, and this shows you her district area. District 3, Councilman Kennedy. District 4, Councilmember Masuda. Councilmember, brand new Councilmember Jess Rivas, Councilman Stephen Madison, and then finally the chairman of the Municipal Service Committee, Andy Wilson. So with that, I'd like to essentially turn to Tim to see if there are some questions, not just for me, but for anybody else. So I'm handing this back to you, Tim.
Thank you. All right. Levi asks, what would make the PWP Council, DPW, to care about declining water reserves that seem so well established? Well, I think the only thing that will do that is public pressure. I think as long as they think that the public isn't paying attention to this issue, that the public doesn't care about preserving this rare environmental resource, which is so important, because the Raymond Basin is important as an emergency supply for Pasadena. It's important because it provides a backup water system, and it's also provided, relatively low-cost water through the years. And this is not just a problem that Pasadena has, really. Groundwater agencies throughout the state of California have problems with declining groundwater levels. And as a matter of fact, the state has established a groundwater management sustainability program that basically focuses on agricultural agencies in the Central Valley of California. But urban basins and adjudicated basins have some of the same problems as those. So it's really a matter of encouraging people to be environmental stewards and to take care of natural resources like the Arroyo Seco stream and the Raymond Basin. Wanted to also get a couple of other before we close. I want to thank everyone for coming and apologize profusely for the technical glitches that we had today, which I know are so frustrating for you and for me, as a matter of fact. So thanks for being patient. But let me show you just a couple of things before we go. And one of them is this is the 25-year budget for the project at WSRP, and in that 25 years, there's $300 million in the budget for pipes, and there's $12 million in there for conservation. So you got to say, what do they value? What do they value? And I would say they're not properly valuing conservation in this program, and that's pretty important. So definitely a big part of the sustainable future. The next thing is that we're having another Zoom show here, a show of Arroyo Currents called Against the Current, which is the story of the amazing project to welcome steelhead trout back to the Los Angeles River, a project that the Arroyo Seco has joined with the City of Los Angeles, the Council on Watershed Health, Stillwater Sciences, Friends of the LA River, and other organizations as well, in order to look at a 5-mile stretch of the Los Angeles River in downtown LA to see how conditions can be altered, whether they can be altered, what could be done in order to create more favorable conditions for native trout in that stretch of the Los Angeles River. The Arroyo Seco is absolutely key to this project because the fish are going to come either from the mountains, the San Gabriel Mountains, through the Arroyo Seco, or they're going to come up from the Pacific Ocean. And it's probably more likely that they will come from the San Gabriel Mountains. There is a steelhead recovery program. The Southern Steelhead is a very rare and unique species, which is endangered, and the federal government has a steelhead recovery program, which lists the Arroyo Seco and the Los Angeles River as part of the solution. So this little program that we're doing on noon, it'll be a Zoom meeting on Friday, February 19th, and it has a very clever animated video in it that will show, which really talks about the story of the history of the fish and hopefully the future of the fish in the Los Angeles River system. So with that, I think we can close the meeting with thanking everyone for coming. And please stay in touch with us as things develop, because only an informed citizenry can insist upon the kind of sustainability and stewardship that is really necessary as we move into the future. Thanks very much. Good night.
Night.